I have to start out by saying there might be a slight overlap in what I'm presenting to what Thomas said, but I'll try to be very brief on those parts. The reason for doing this talk was the poll that I think Lasse did last year among the audience, asking whoever in here was peering, and very few people actually raised their hands. And when challenged, the reason that came up was that, well, transit is now so cheap, why should we even care about peering? As we just heard in the previous talk, well, it can actually be cheaper, but I'll look at some of the other reasons than just the price. It used to be that peering was more or less all about getting something that was cheaper than transit, but over the last many years, we have seen the prices on transit dropping significantly every year, like in the magnitude of 25 to 30%. In the same period, the port prices on the internet exchanges has remained somewhat unchanged, and the prices on cross-connect keeps going up. Adding all of those things together, well, the business case might not be that obvious as it used to be. But not everything in this world is about money, and there are several other reasons why you might get into peering. So let's have a look at those. Reason number one is latency. Everyone cares about latency, no matter if you are a gamer or if you are an enterprise company using services in the cloud. If you're, for instance, connecting to something like a Citrix service hosted at a public cloud provider, well, then you care a lot about latency. We have been able to provide very low latency end-user access over fiber for a number of years. And we're also seeing classical residential services like DSL and DOCSIS getting in the sub 10 millisecond round trip times towards the first router hubs. Even a modern 4G LTE network is around 20 milliseconds. Moving a bit forward, we see those latency getting much further down. As we saw on the Huawei presentation yesterday, they are promising all the way down to 1 millisecond on 5G network, moving a bit forward. And also low latency DOCSIS will be there at some point, also getting us in around 1 to 2 milliseconds. That basically removes all latency on the last mile access. Within your own network, you tend to be more or less constrained by the physical size of your network. You can't speed up light in the fibers. So if you want to reduce latency, that has to be on everything that's outside of your network. And since peering is, by definition, a direct connection between two networks, that is, in my opinion, the best way to reduce latency even further. The next one is resiliency. Most people tend to have some kind of redundancy on their transit. It could either be 2 or more connections to one provider, or you could connect to several providers by one or more connection. Especially for those who are relying on a single transit provider, having peering as a backup is hugely beneficial. And it's cheap and reliable. Especially if you start to peer in multiple locations or connect to multiple IXs, you get even better resiliency on your peering connection. So even if you get to the point where you actually lose your transit provider entirely, you will still have a significant part of the internet being reachable. That, of course, assumes that you still have DNS within your network, that your caches still hold all of these IP addresses or host names you need to reach, or that you have a peering relationship with those name servers actually being authoritative for the host that you want to connect to. And another thing is that we hear a lot about routing leaks. Just going back 1 or 2 days, there was a route leak that affected at least Facebook. And if you have a direct connection, you will by default have a shorter AS path than if you get the traffic over transit, which means that unless you do some really weird configuration in the network, your network will prefer the shortest AS path, meaning that you are most likely to reach the intended network and not whatever network has leaked a prefix. Denial of service attack, reason number 3. For a long time, denial of service attacks has really been distributed denial of service attacks, but to us it's just a lot of traffic that we don't want in our network. By nature, a distributed attack will originate from more or less anywhere in the world. And a lot of those traffic tends to originate from, well, not so well-maintained networks, I would say. These networks tend not to be peered. They tend not to peer in Denmark or Europe. They are very much in other parts of the world. So if you do peering and you look at those facts, you will end up seeing that during a denial of service attack, you will see the majority of the unwanted or attack traffic will come in over your transit ports, while the traffic that your customers really care about, like stuff coming from the large content providers, the large public cloud providers, you will see that coming in over your peering. And that's a huge benefit if you want to implement some kind of filtering, where you start to drop some specific kind of traffic. And even if you get to a degree where you kind of have to turn up the filter, where you start dropping maybe port 80 traffic or something, you'll still be able to reach a lot via your peering partners. If it get really, really bad, if you're hit by enormously attack, sometimes you end up having to actually withdraw the announcement of one or more of your prefixes towards your transit provider, basically removing you from the internet. However, you will of course not withdraw that traffic towards your peers, and again you will have a decent connectivity to the networks and the content that your users or customers care about. Finally, when you do peering, you will of course deploy proper security. I think Job Snijders will talk about that later today. But it also means, first of all, you will not be one of those people leaking other networks prefixes into the internet. So you will keep the internet clean, and you will also have less chance of seeing unwanted traffic coming in over your peering sessions. That is, of course, not possible on transit ports, because on a transit port you expect basically everything. Reason number 4. Now we're getting kind of less technical, but still some of the points that I think is important. As everyone knows, the internet has been around like since forever, and it's still here today. And I think the main reason for that is that it's built in a hugely decentralized and distributed way, also very redundant. However, the last 10 years or so, we have seen a lot of consolidation going on. There's some very, very large players on the market, both if we look at content providers, if you look at transit providers that keeps on merging, and also other services like DNS as provided by, say, Quad9 and Cloudflare. We have some very, very dominant transit players in the market. For instance, we have Level 3, or I guess I should say CenturyLink now. It's a huge, huge company. We also have the merged Global Connect Nearnet that have a very significant part of the Danish market. And if one of those providers have issues within the network, well, it will actually affect a significant part of the internet, at least in a certain region. And, well, these networks do have issues every now and then. Maybe someone remember what happened back before Christmas when CenturyLink has a huge, huge outage in the US. I think it was caused by their transmission network, but the end result was that very large parts of the network was down for quite some time. And to keep the internet alive, it's hugely important that we don't rely on any single player to have a well-working internet. By doing peering, you kind of break down those barriers. Even small people can connect and not rely on the large networks. Finally, I guess the reason why we are all here today, try to be part of a great community. And it's not just about getting new peering sessions or hanging out at the NetNod party and drinking beers. There's more to it than that. A lot of the people here in the audience today are very, very smart people. And a lot of you are probably among the smartest people, at least within your field, in whatever company you work in. That can be kind of challenging. If you have some ideas or some problems, it can be very hard to find someone to talk to, especially if you don't want to talk to vendors that just want to sell your stuff. So going out to events like DKNOG, the RIPE meetings, the European peering forums, IX, technical meetings, etc., you get to hang around with all those great people that's here today. And a lot of the people would actually be probably even more smarter than you are, and you can discuss all of those things. Of course, you should not tell the very intimate stuff about your company, but in general, it's technical topics that you can openly discuss with everyone. By having a good relationship to a network, whether that be that you have been drinking beers with someone from the company or you have a peering relationship, it tends to be much easier to fix problems. So if you have maybe a routing issue within a network, or you see a lot of spam originating or whatever, it's much, much easier to fix by going directly to someone you know, or someone that knows your name. And really, going back to what Lasse said yesterday morning, don't be afraid. The people in this community, they are really, really great people. Don't be intimidated by walking up to some from the very largest network. They are very cool people, and they like to talk to you. They care about the same things that you do. So just get into it. The very last slide, I want to mention that the entry level to peering is now lower than it has ever been. Again, as we heard in the former talk, you can actually get a significant part of your traffic through peering, even if you have caches deployed in the network from the large content providers. This is, I have to admit, looking from the eyeball side of things, and if you're an enterprise, it might be slightly different. And in general, the large content providers, they're happy to peer with you if you can get in contact with them. But well, yeah, in general, they have open peering policies. Routers capable of holding the full internet table, they are now cheaper than ever. And honestly, unless you're planning to resell transit, you even don't need a router with a full routing table to do peering. You can just take a default router, default candidate from your transit, and then have the more specific routes from your peers. There's a lot of great tools around, like the IX route service and the peering DB that Arnold just talked about, that makes it so much easier to set up new peerings than it used to be. We're also seeing new internet exchanges like NLIX that runs a, I would say, distributed peering platform throughout the majority of Europe, and by connecting to, say, a single port in Copenhagen, you can reach, I don't know, 500 more networks. Yeah, that's a huge benefit. And finally, if you think, well, this peering, that sounds kind of cool, want to learn more about it, hang around for the rest of the day with more peering sessions, and go check out drpeering.net. That was all from my side.